Welcome to Shakespeare the Whole Year, a series of research-based, student-friendly talks on various aspects of Shakespeare and his works, hosted by the Shakespeare Society of India East Zone under the aegis of SSI New Delhi. Lecture number 4, delivered by Shondip Biswas, is titled Cross-Dressing and Disguise in Shakespeare's Comedies. Shondip Biswas is currently working as assistant professor in English at Pachur College. His areas of interest include gender studies, Indian writing in English, Renaissance drama, and Gothic literature.
Hello everyone. I am honored to have been invited by Dr. Nayana De on behalf of Shakespeare Society of India East Zone to be a part of their wonderful initiative, Shakespeare the Whole Year. Today my topic for discussion is cross-dressing and disguise in Shakespeare's comedies. We currently live in a world that is necessarily fixated on inclusion and exclusion. Who we want in our communities and who we don't. Who is one of us and who is the other. Or, as King Lear on his way to prison, that symbolic place of exclusion says, who is in, who is out. With the escalation in the levels of stress and anxiety and erosion of values, humanity seems to have undertaken a quest to search for inherent meaning and purpose in life. Considering the hullabaloo, the emotional aridity, and the spiritual void that we witness in all spheres of contemporary society, we can't help but hark back to the words of the bard. The external climate influences human psychology and vice versa. And this is exactly what may have prompted Shakespeare's iconic heroines to resort to cross-dressing and disguise in some of the famous plays. There was an inherent contradiction in Renaissance culture. On the one hand, it was a departure from the customs and traditions of the medieval ages, while on the other, the influence of medieval society made the 16th century English society pervasively patriarchal. Thus, women were theoretically under the rule of men and generally believed to be less rational than men. Legally, a woman's identity was subsumed under that of her male protector. The woman's position of inferiority required her to strive for 4 virtues: obedience, chastity, silence, and piety. From the social point of view, cross-dressing in the Renaissance had an important aspect. As women were considered inferior to men, cross-dressing presented an important change of status. If a woman pretended to be a man, she was, in fact, assuming more rights than she was entitled to. Apart from several exceptions in real life, it was only in fiction and carnivalesque festivities that cross-dressing was allowed as a transient escape from everyday reality. Since a woman was not supposed to leave her house and to travel alone, some women might have worn male clothing for protection. If a woman's male disguise was discovered, however, she was suspected of leading a loose life and was punished. It is also significant to note that in Shakespeare's time, Queen Elizabeth I ruled for 45 years, from 1558 to 1603, and contributed to the prosperity of her country in various fields like politics, economy, and culture. Her successful reign proved that women could also be knowledgeable masculine, and possess outstanding leadership skills. Her masculine qualities, as Pitt points out, were fearless courage, toughness, arrogant defiance, and a provocative defense of territory. The Queen enjoyed Shakespeare's plays, as we all know, and he acted before her at Greenwich in 1594. Thus, it is reasonable to infer that Elizabeth I influenced Shakespeare's writing of the brilliant cross-dressed heroines. Shakespeare was quick in reflecting the intellectual influences of his time. In the three plays that I will be primarily focusing on in my presentation, The Merchant of Venice, As You Like It, and Twelfth Night, cross-dressing is central to both the complication and the resolution of the plot. All the heroines in these plays, Portia, Rosalind, and Viola, are from aristocratic or wealthy families, educated, intelligent, and courageous enough to disguise themselves in order to enter the men's world. In this way, Shakespeare also catered to his female audience. The heroines also disguise themselves as men in The Two Gentlemen of Verona, one of Shakespeare's earliest plays, and in Cymbeline, one of his latest. The reverse of this trend is seen in The Taming of the Shrew and in The Merry Wives of Windsor. Male characters are disguised as women. The first play that I will be talking about is Twelfth Night. By dressing herself as a boy and taking the name Cesario, Viola, like several other heroines in Shakespeare's comedies, establishes a false appearance which is both liberating and dangerous. In her role as Cesario, she enjoys a freedom of action which is denied to her as a woman. At the same time, disguise becomes a wickedness, luring Olivia to fall in love with the mere semblance of a man. As Viola remarks, "Poor lady, she were better love a dream. Disguise, I see thou art a wickedness." Since she cannot make the feminine appeal to Orsino that she would have wanted, Viola herself is also the sufferer, and to add to her distress, she must face the ordeal of acting as proxy wooer of another woman. Later, disguise almost involves her in a duel for which her true feminine nature makes her quite unsuited, though she is saved from that by another freak of false appearance, when at the crucial moment of danger, she is mistaken for her brother and rescued by Antonio. Her persona as a boy releases the pert, witty, assertive side of her character. It is this attractive boyishness which captivates Olivia. Her ready answers show a kind of charming swagger which spreads to her whole being, as Olivia recognizes when she broods on Cesario's words. "What is your parentage? Above my fortunes, yet my state is well. I am a gentleman. I'll be sworn thou art, thy tongue, thy face, thy limbs, actions and spirit do give thee fivefold blason." Yet Viola retains her femininity as well. Although she exhibits both a capacity for quick, intuitive action, for example in seizing the opportunity to serve the Duke as an eunuch, and in perceiving the effect of her Cesario persona on Olivia, she is also well aware of the limitations still imposed on her freedom of action by her sex. At the same time, she possesses a vibrancy and depth of emotion which perhaps belong to her essential womanliness, but which her masculine role enables her to express with unusual frankness. This gives rise to some of the most resonant speeches in the play. For example, "Make me a willow cabin at your gate," in which she adopts the conventional posture of the Petrarchan lover, but through the force of her sympathetic imagination turns it into something movingly real. And she sat like Patience on a monument in which she creates an allegory revealing the depth of frustration and suffering resulting from what is in effect her own situation. As a rare courtier, Viola in her disguise delivers the most convincing courtship speech in the play. Asked by Olivia what he would do if he was her lover, Cesario replies that he would set up a cabin at her gate and fix the world's attention on her by repeatedly calling her name. Such a determined wooing scene shows Viola's courage to take the initiative in pursuing love, which is in sharp contrast with Orsino's wooing behavior and the stereotypical norms that expect self-restraint from women. In masculine attire, Viola is utterly free from the restrictions imposed by society on women and achieves subjective freedom. Viola gets stuck in misery when she realizes in what entanglements she has been involved. My master loves her dearly, and I, poor monster, fond as much on him, and she mistaken seems to dote on me. The amorous triangle burdens her delicate heart, and she is full of tender compassion for the lady whom her disguise has led astray, as well as for herself. Viola reflects on this and calls her disguise a wickedness. She laments on women's frailty. How easy is it for the proper false in women's waxen hearts to set their forms? Alas, our frailty is the cause, not we, for such as we are made of, such we be. She could do nothing about this problem and only hopes that time could resolve it. In response to Orsino's generalized opinion of women's inability to love, the disguised Viola invents the story of a wordless woman, hinting at the nature of her own love for Orsino. A blank, my lord, she never told her love, but let concealment, like a worm in the bud, feed on her damask cheek. She pined in thought, and with a green and yellow melancholy, she sat like Patience on a monument, smiling at grief. Cross-dressing enables Viola to give utterance to her love, although in a carefully disguised way. However, the love-struck woman in her story follows the contemporary prescriptions of female conduct, which manifests Viola's modesty in the relationship. Her playfulness is assumed as part of her disguise as court page and is guarded by the strictest delicacy. When forced into duelling, Viola exclaims in an aside, "Pray God, defend me. A little thing would make me tell how much I lack of a man." Her inability to duel with Sir Andrew proves her feminine interiority. As Jameson suggests, a sweet consciousness of her feminine nature is forever breaking through her masquerade. As Viola replies to Olivia, "And yet by the very fangs of malice, I swear I am not that I play." The fluidity of gender is also manifested in others' comments on the fusion of gender attributes in Cesario. Orsino first comments on it, "For they shall yet belie thy happy years that say thou art a man. Diana's lip is not more smooth and rubious. Thy small pipe is as the maiden's organ, shrill and sound, and all is semblemative a woman's part." Viola's small pipe identifies her as both boy and woman. Malvolio also notices it, and his description of Viola in standing water between boy and man suggests the fluctuating status of the adolescent male who was neither one nor the other, reminding the audience of the female character and male disguise as well as the boy actor, thus illustrating the thematic concern. Moreover, the fluidity of gender is re-emphasized at the conclusion of the play when Cesario is revealed as Viola. The twins, Viola and Sebastian, share one face, one voice, one habit. Their similarities make their nominally different genders of no importance. Orsino effortlessly enlarges his favor on Cesario to Viola as he says, "Cesario, come, for so you shall be while you are a man, but when in other habits you are seen, Orsino's mistress and his fancy queen." Like the Duke, Olivia easily moves Sebastian into the place formerly held by Cesario, since they have the same quality. At the same time, Orsino continues to call Viola Cesario, and she remains in masculine, usurped attire, and the retrieval of her maiden weeds is deferred, as is her return to the normative gender role. The contrast between her appearance of bright male youthfulness and this almost tragic femininity is symptomatic of her double nature, which consists of both practical energy and deep feeling. In this sense, she is simultaneously both masculine and feminine, and her disguise is not only an effective plot device but also a means of displaying the full range of her virtually androgynous character. It is interesting to explore how cross-dressing is connected with the concept of androgyny, popular in the Renaissance. This concept appeared in alchemy as well as in writing and visual art. One of the key terms of alchemy was balance, and androgyny is an expression of a balance between the masculine and the feminine principles. The basic concept of androgyny in this context is one in which the psychological aspects of masculine and feminine, as generally understood by Western society, are synthesized into a harmonious and balanced whole within each individual. Within a feminist epistemology, it offers an opportunity to escape the power structures and value systems of patriarchy, and to attain individual fulfillment in both writing and identity. Virginia Woolf, as we all famously know, introduces the idea of androgyny into feminist literary theory, In a Room of One's Own, and into feminist ontology through the androgynous protagonist of Orlando. Although the binary distinction between theory and fiction is deliberately blurred, the spiritual level of androgyny was even more important than the physical one. Cross-dressing stresses the idea of androgyny by giving it a physical dimension, but most of Shakespeare's heroines are active, dynamic, and resourceful, which are the qualities associated rather with masculinity than femininity. At the same time, the masculine features are balanced by the constant reminders of the heroine's femininity. With the cross-dressed heroines, these reminders are perhaps even more important than with the others, as their masculinity is being continuously confirmed by their clothes. Now let's come to the second play that I'll be focusing on, and that is As You Like It, in which cross-dressing and disguise is very integral to the plot. As You Like It begins with Rosalind dejectedly remembering her banished father and her consequent loss of preeminent social place. She suffers as companion to her uncle the usurper's daughter Celia. Despite being held in deep affection by Celia, Rosalind is still like half a prisoner in the palace, where she maintains her smoothness, her very silence, and her patience. She is a melancholy sufferer at Duke Frederick's court, and remains naturally disheartened as her father had been banished and she remains at the court of the usurper, while Celia tends to be her protector because of greater resources. After being banished by her uncle, Rosalind decides to dress up as a man named Ganymede in doublet and hose. Rosalind is more than common tall, which enables her to look more like a man. She arms herself with a curtle axe, a boar spear, and a martial outside, In this way, Rosalind can play the man convincingly. Were it not better, because that I am more than common tall, that I did suit me all points like a man? A gallant curtal axe upon my thigh, a boar spear in my hand, and in my heart lie there what hidden woman's fear their will. We'll have a swashing and a martial outside, as many other mannish cowards have, that do outface it with their semblances. The initial reason for which she dresses up as a man is self-defense. Before setting for the Forest of Arden, Rosalind considers, what danger will it be to us, maids as we are, to travel forth so far? Beauty provoketh thieves sooner than gold. Then she decides to suit herself like a man, a precaution against sexual assault. Rosalind possesses almost all the qualities with which we have been familiar in Viola, except that her transformation is more radical. In the trip to the Forest of Arden, Rosalind, disguising as Ganymede, takes the lead and displays as Celia's protector, while Celia is increasingly subordinated. She is reduced to watching Rosalind's outstanding wit and sportive activity. The doublet and hose also enable Rosalind to act at her own will. She amuses herself from behind her page's disguise by making herself Orlando's confidant, and bids him to woo her every day in order to taste his love by pretending to be his Rosalind. In this scene of disguised wooing, Rosalind is literally radiant with wit and youth, whose conversation with Orlando is full of voluble, laughing grace. Though deeply in love with Orlando, her male guise gives her license and opportunity to mock the amatory conventions, as she tells Orlando, love is merely a madness, and I tell you, deserves as well a dark house and a whip as mad men do. And the reason why they are not so punished and cured is that lunacy is so ordinary that the whippers are in love too. And her unbridled enthusiasm and intelligence permeates the whole scene. Besides, the cross-dressed Rosalind severely chastises Phoebe for mistreating her lover, gaily manipulates Phoebe's love for her to throw off her disguise, and arranges the final marriage scene. She is obviously going through a transition from passive resignation to assertive wit. It is clearly evident that her natural gaiety and inherent vivacity, which was missing in the court scenes, was restored as soon as she reaches the Forest of Arden. In addition, Rosalind constantly puts into circulation the stereotypes of masculinity and femininity. Her brag of manhood shows Elizabethan gender roles. I could find in my heart to disgrace my man's apparel and to cry like a woman. But I must comfort the weaker vessel, as doublet and hose ought to show itself courageous to petticoat. Doublet and hose, the standard costume for an Elizabethan courtier, are used here to identify manhood, just as petticoat identifies femininity. The whole society has internalized this logic that courage as an attribute is specific to male, while female is weaker. Do you not know I am a woman? When I think, I must speak, she says to Celia, a mocking use of a stock satirical jibe about women's garrulity, used by Rosalind to justify feminine importunacy and also comically reminding the audience of the boy who plays her. In The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir suggests that if women are given the opportunity to assert their subjective freedom, they could display the same lively exuberance, the same curiosity, the same initiative, the same hardihood as a boy. Cross-dressing permits these two heroines not only to subvert their gender identity in appearance, but also to exhibit their intelligence, creativity, and courage, qualities that are conventionally fixed on male. Such credit endowed to the heroines is worth considering, given the conventional prescriptions in Elizabethan authoritative texts that women should be silent, chaste, and obedient, that silence is the best eloquence for women, that the woman should learn in silence with all subjection. In this sense, Shakespeare adopts cross-dressing in these two plays to interrogate the established notions that dictate verbal and behavioral submissiveness of women. Many scholars have studied the phenomenon of cross-dressing in these two plays throughout the ages. Some critics examine the plays cross-dressing within the socio-historical and cultural context. Edward Berry, for example, insists upon the play's intention of reconstruction of social norms violated in the course of the action. In his view, the two plays' ending, implying the heroine's role as a wife, represents the resumption of the conventional patriarchal hierarchy. On the other hand, some critics see the two plays in a contrary view. Catherine Belsey claims that the cross-dressed heroines show the possibility of a disruption of sexual difference which radically challenge patriarchal values. Similarly, Leigh Bullion believes that both these two plays consist of cross-dressed women engaged in homoerotic relationships with men and women, which challenge the notion of the heteronormative social standard. Carol Thomas Neely sees the concluding marriage in another way. She considers it less a prescriptive imposition of a hierarchical patriarchy than an accommodation to subjects, both male and female, who negotiate within culture and ideology to attain their desires. Barbara Hodgson considers that the effect that boy actors playing women cross-dressing as men offers up a possibility of flexible sex-gender identities, confounding the body's truth. Phyllis Rakin suggests that the dramatic representations of cross-dressed characters reproduce the unstable sex-gender system in Shakespeare's time, putting the gender of the characters in flux to complicate the dramatic action. Finally, we come to Portia in The Merchant of Venice. Venice and Belmont, where this particular play is set, are societies where male authority reigns supreme. Rob Smith, in his critical analysis of the play, stated that The Merchant of Venice reflects the subordinate position of women in Elizabethan England. We come to know about Portia, who belongs to a rich family, the kind that Bassanio would prefer as a means of upward social mobility. She represents the traditional Elizabethan woman who does not go against her father's will. When we first meet Portia, we find her as the head of the household because her father is already deceased by then. Portia can take decisions to run the family, but only after conforming to the values and doctrines given by her father. Even though Portia's father remains an absent figure throughout the play, his authority is far-reaching. Portia has no right to take her own decisions. We find Portia uttering to Nerissa that yet a maiden hath no tongue but thought. An unmarried woman must not voice her thoughts or her desire. She might have intelligence and wisdom, but she is not permitted to express them. It is interesting to see that Portia, who manages to hold the position of the head of the family, still must pursue a husband, as she cannot be expected to take care of herself and her people. As the bond of casket suggests, choosing of the husband is not a matter of choice, rather a game of destiny. She gives immense importance to her father's will regarding her marriage. She says to Nerissa, "If I live to be as old as Sibylla, I will die as chaste as Diana unless I be obtained by the manner of my father's will. Here she is expressing her wish that even if she has to continue living her life for centuries, like the mythical character Sibylla, who begged eternal life to the Greek god Apollo, she will not marry against her father's will. She adds that she will not regret to be unmarried like another mythical character Diana, who was a goddess, according to Roman mythology, who never married. However, what an Elizabethan audience might not notice is the severity of the condition, that the father in reality played a gamble on Portia's fate, without leaving any choice for her to intervene. Portia says to the Prince of Morocco, "Besides, the lottery of my destiny bars me the right of voluntary choosing." Portia herself is mentioning it as a lottery of her destiny, where she is unable to choose her husband. The casket test takes away the right of her free will. In a patriarchal society, even a dead father has more influence than a living daughter. The reason might be that, as Kate Millett suggests, traditionally, patriarchy granted the father nearly total ownership over wife or wives and children, including the powers of physical abuse and often even those of murder and sale. Portia cannot or does not dare to resist her father's authoritative power. She is regretting about this to Nerissa and says, "O me, the word chooses. I may neither choose whom I would nor refuse whom I dislike. So is the will of a living daughter curbed by the will of a dead father. Is it not hard, Nerissa, that I cannot choose one nor refuse none?" In the second sex, Simone de Beauvoir explains this behavior as the result of external factors and social constructions which force women to merge in a state of lethargy where she is unable to take control of her life. Beauvoir said, "Everything combines to restrain her personal ambition. Therefore, Portia cannot choose anyone whom she likes or cannot deny the one she dislikes. She is confined in an overwhelming psychological inertia." Another interesting point to note is even though Portia is not unaware of the fact that her life is being framed by a deceased person who cannot even be there to see how it turns out, still she does not protest. She only expresses discontent. She abided by her father's decision and does not take control of her life in its vital decisions. Here I would like to quote Kate Millett, who explained this passivity as, "Patriarchy has colonized women's minds by cultivating stereotypically feminine thought and behavior in them." Millett's analysis implies that to gain social power, women must learn to develop those traits encouraged only in males. Cross-dressing helps a woman to gain that social power and show her intelligence. The internalization of patriarchy was so subtle yet so powerful that Portia, who emerges as the hero of the play, remains passive regarding her own life. The society has fixed two categories for women, and the one which is not submissive is castrated out as the evil one. Lois Tyson put it as, "Patriarchal ideology suggests that there are only two identities a woman can have. If she accepts her traditional gender role and obeys the patriarchal rules, she is a good girl. If she doesn't, she is a bad girl." However, in the Bond story, Antonio's life is dependent on Portia's intelligence, and to save his life, Portia needs to change her female attire and adopt a male disguise. Only then she can enter the courtroom. She challenges Shylock's clever Bond and saves Antonio's life. At this point, male authority is under the threat of Portia's intelligence. After she cross-dresses as the lawyer Balthazar, she transitions into a completely different role where she achieves a temporary drift from her female identity. This is a moment of self-assertion for Portia. After dressing as Balthazar, she is able to show her intelligence like any other man. As Jean E. Howard, in her book Crossing the Stage Controversies on Cross-Dressing, stated that Portia's actions are aimed not at letting her occupy man's place indefinitely, however, but at making her own place in a patriarchy more bearable. Without cross-dressing, going in a court was not possible for a woman at that time. She cross-dresses as Balthazar not only because she wants to save Antonio, but also because she wants to find a strong and authoritative voice, which is otherwise stifled and muted when she is a woman. We find a suppressed voice of her in those acts where she is in her female attire, but her authoritative voice is found in the court scene where she is in male attire. Furthermore, when Shakespeare gives her the opportunity to save a man in the court, then it is understandable that he gives a woman that authority. But because of patriarchal society, that woman has to choose cross-dressing. She must not disturb the patriarchal eye. Portia's cross-dressing enables her to express her talent as she is free of the burden of her sexual identity. She even shows that a woman can be a shrewd lawyer who can turn the tables on the adversary. In the courtroom, as Portia's interpretation twists the terms of the bond, the audience is left enthralled. The courtroom scene is therefore a perfect taming of the male gaze. For a moment, we all forget that Balthazar is a woman. Portia's change of personality is very impressive compared to her previous weakness. The one who could not stand up against the will of a dead father stands in front of a group of men and saves Antonio. She is not shaken by Shylock's dominating presence and defeats him using her intelligence alone. She says, "The words expressly are a pound of flesh. Take then thy bond, take thou thy pound of flesh. But in the cutting it, if thou dost shed one drop of Christian blood, thy lands and goods are by the laws of Venice confiscate unto the state of Venice." Here, Portia, being Balthazar, is reminding Shylock that if he goes against his own bond and shed one drop of Christian blood of Antonio, then his wealth must be seized by the law of Venice. The court scene portrays a complete annihilation of patriarchal fixations about women lacking adequate intelligence to be of any significance in public life. Before being defeated, Shylock himself was praising Portia as the most rightful judge, the most learned judge, and a Daniel come to judgment. It indicates that Portia played a lawyer's role perfectly, so perfectly that no one could find out a single flaw. Additionally, she comes up with such an innovative idea to save Antonio's life, which even Bassanio and the Duke failed to. Portia successfully accomplishes what all the men around her failed to do. These three heroines choose cross-dressing because they face different crises in their respective lives. Their problems may vary, but they share the common providence of suffering from male authoritativeness. They show us that after resorting to cross-dressing, they achieve power, control, liberty, and freedom. They acquire financial, political, and gender liberty when they are no more in their feminine attire. But most importantly, it frees them from a lack of defense. Instead of looking for a defender, they take control and defend themselves. With the help of Shakespeare's unique device of cross-dressing, these heroines actually successfully break the circle of patriarchy. Thus, Shakespeare's heroines in these three great comedies are not damsels in distress who need to be rescued by knights in shining armor. Rather, they are empowered and independent women who are facilitated by cross-dressing and disguise to challenge established gender stereotypes and dismantle patriarchal norms with aplomb. Thank you.